Welcome back, Inebri-art. It's Andy of the Inebri-art podcast. Of course, I mean you know that you're downloading it. And today we have a guest who I think one of the first things I want to ask is like, what came first? Because you have some producer credits, you have director credits, you have actor credits. Nick Gregorio, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me, man. I'm really excited to be here and here to chop it up. But what came first? Screenwriter actually came first. That was the initial kind of bug that got me into the film industry. But I had started out in digital media, like fine art meets computers. I was like way before film had completely converted to the digital space. So screenwriting was the first time I was like, okay, I could do this and I understand this, and it like kind of clicks in my brain. And then it was short films and sketches and then putting ourselves in our own shorts and sketches, because you kind of run out. I was from Philadelphia, so you kind of run out of people that want to act. Yeah. Like there's that post-college halo where everyone's like, we can do creative stuff every weekend. Yeah. And then like 3 weeks go by and everyone's like, I don't ever want to do this again. I want to go get drunk and go out to dinner. So after a while, you just start plugging yourself into it. A few people tell you like, oh, you're not too bad. They're like, all right, well, let's just do this. Let's try this out. Eventually made a feature film called Happy Birthday, Harris Malden. Back when I was like 23, got released in 2008, went to Cinevegas Film Festival. That was like pretty awesome, but it was also at the beginning of the financial crisis and sort of the death of indie film. Yep. Went and made another feature, super low budget, called Green. And then realized that if I wanted to be in this industry, I was going to have some marketable talents, more so than writing, directing, acting, because everybody wants to do those. So I got into cinematography and editing, and then eventually producing. So I had a sketch comedy show at Machinima. I had a late night talk show at Machinima. I did a show called DC Daily for the DC Universe platform. Nice. I was the EP and a director of that, and we did 500 episodes. And I'm really proud of that show. And then I this past 2 years I've been working with Amazon, so doing kind of like junket style talk shows for Amazon during this work from home environment. Recently I did the Wheel of Time after show, the official Wheel of Time. Oh, no kidding! Show. Yeah, I produced and directed that for Amazon. And I've been working on Lord of the Rings a little bit. I kind of pulled away from that. And of course, my third feature film, Old Strangers, which is out now on all VOD platforms.
It's so funny to hear you kind of talk about that, because we've been podcasting now for about 5 years. We're getting, every day we get more and more serious about the process and what we're doing. And now we have YouTube content, and I want to do more live streaming, and I'm the kind of person who's like, I'm that creative person who's like, let's do the creative thing all week, not just this weekend. Yeah. Let's just do it all the time. And it's like I remember when we started this podcast, I went to my now producer editor and was like, hey, I want to start a podcast. He goes, so I'm going to have to learn how to edit sound. I'm like, yeah, good thing you picked up on that, because that's exactly where I was going. And it's just, I love this kind of, we've always been this, screw it, we'll learn it on the fly and figure it out as we go. Is that kind of same? Because you were like, I went to this and then I learned this skill and then I learned this skill. Is that kind of how you're just like, I signed up for it and I figured out how to do it? And
yeah, that was it. I can't stress enough that if you want to be successful in these creative fields, you cannot limit yourself unless you're wealthy or know people. Mm-hmm. You cannot limit your skill set. You know what I mean? You can't explore and learn and try new things. And YouTube is an amazing resource. Like, for sure. And there's so many articles being written. I remember DaVinci Resolve is now on version 17 point something. Mm-hmm. I learned it when it was version 8. And I was in Philly. I drove to New York to see a seminar. I modded my computer to run it. And I just watched videos and I went to seminars, and most of this stuff is free. It's not like you have to enroll in a college course. College courses are so high level, but they're not. A lot of the production world, whether it's music, whether it's podcasting, whether it's video, it's very much like a trade, very hard skills trade where you need to know how to do the thing. Like it's not theoretical. And when you're enrolled in like a university program, there's a lot of theory. There's a lot of academia that's attached to that. There's a lot of reading and understanding things on different levels, but there's not like the brass tacks that you can do on your own, where you're sitting with a project and you're like, oh, how do you edit audio? Let me watch 25 tutorials. Let me, trial by error 50 times. And then on the 51st time, you're like, I think I might be getting the hang of it. And then someone listens to it and goes, that's terrible. And you're like, back to the drawing board.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't stress that enough, that like, it's a lonely road. It's a rough road. It's sometimes very unforgiving, but to me, there's nothing more satisfying than like going in the lab and jamming away at something. And, when you're done, you're like, I made this, I did this, I learned this. And I worked with a great group of people to like execute and bring it to fruition. So, yeah.
And it's one of those things that I'm learning a lesson that I've already learned, which sounds stupid, but, I'm a visual artist, and, in art school, you're broke.
Yeah.
And then, you kind of end up in a career that's not necessarily art based, but you have a little bit more money, and you go out and you buy some nice quality tools, and then you're like, wow, this makes the world of difference. And it's the same thing. Like, we started the podcast with a $60 mic. I filmed some YouTube content that I'm trying to do green screen with, just using my camera on my laptop. And then I used a Canon, and it's like, oh, I see. That makes a huge difference. And it's not just the program. And it's just one of those, if I had ILM money, I could do way more, but you do the best with what you got, You
do the best with what you got. And I look at it like it's incremental growth. Like, it shouldn't be like right out of the gate. And I think that's difficult for a lot of creatives, where out of the gate, you want it to be perfect. Right. Mm-hmm. And has never been the case ever. The only way you get perfect out of the gate was a ton of money. Right. I'll point to the Safdie brothers, and I'm a big fan of their work. Yeah, these guys are mega wealthy, huge opportunities. They're part of like the New York elite social circles. Their first movies had movie stars in them. That will not happen. That will not happen if you are some rando indie filmmaker. Mm-hmm. You're not going to write a script so good that Adam Sandler reads it and is like, I want to be in this. Cannot happen. That is impossible. Like, unless you know Adam Sandler, he's not going to read your script. And even if you do know him, he probably won't read your script. So Robert Pattinson isn't just looking for crazy, weird indie stuff to do, and I think when you understand that, when you understand the broader mechanics of the industries, know that your first thing isn't going to work, or your second thing, or your third thing. And it's a learning process. And that was, I wish someone told me that 15 years ago when I started this journey, that like, hey, this is an industry. This is not one and done. This is not, you make a thing and you're world famous and everyone throws money at you. Like, for most people, this is an industry, and it's very much a trade industry. And I come from like a construction background, like wallpaper, paint, interiors, remodeling and stuff. Yeah. And once I saw the movie industry or the production world for that, I was like, oh, okay. That's all it is. It's another job. It's another thing. And, some of them are really high level creative, and some of them are very functional. And you kind of have to bring that same work ethic to each project and learn as much as you can, and take away from it as much as you can.
So I was listening to a podcast earlier today, and the podcaster was making some really interesting comparisons about how, athletes have, practice and scrimmages, and stage actors have rehearsal, and kind of all these prep things. Do you feel like when you're making content like a movie or a streaming show, is there that practice, or is it just kind of like, oh, I'm in it and I'm going to do the best that I can, and this will be practice for the next thing that I'm doing?
So with Old Strangers, that, I have a lot of experience under my belt. Mm-hmm. So with this project, and it's a story of three friends that break quarantine by going up to Big Bear, getting a cabin, trying to reconnect. And while reconnecting, they stumble upon something in the woods. It's a very simple story. There is some classic horror and sci-fi tropes, but they are holding a mirror up to our current times, mm-hmm. and the pandemic of it all, and sort of how we treat each other. And also just the idea of reconnecting with each other and it not always going as planned. Right. So I knew it was a smaller story. Here are the things you can't control in a production. A lot of times you're probably going to have a low budget. You're probably going to have to cut corners or find creative solutions. But what you do have is time. And kind of getting to like it rehearsal, everything was storyboarded on this project. My director of photography, Blake Gayton, who's absolutely brilliant, he and I sat down. We had worked together for years. We worked together for 5 years straight at the studio. I mean, doing like hundreds of pieces of content for Machinima or WB. So we sat down and we went over lighting concepts, camera packages, all my boards, all the way I wanted the camera to move, like the way the landscape was going to be a character unto itself, that it was going to be experiential, naturalistic. And then you do the work. You know, you don't leave any stone unturned. You're like, you don't show up to set not knowing what you're going to do on a small production.
Yeah.
You have a really good idea of what you're going to do for every scene. And then my co-executive producer, Drew Marion, who's my lead editor on the project, he and I did all the post-production, including the scoring, sound design, like you name it. Like Drew absolutely murdered the scoring on the picture. Like, I think it's brilliant. But he and I have edited hundreds of pieces of content together. You know, that was the practice. All those jobs, all those like mundane talk shows and things, that was our practice. And knowing going into this project, look, this is going to be the style. It's going to breathe a little bit. We're not going to be cutting things with an inch of its life, but there's going to be some moments that need to be cut tack sharp. Like there's going to be no room for fat here, no room for experimentation. With my cast, I kind of wrote the roles for two good friends. Ted Evans is a really good friend of mine, and he was in a lot of our shorts and our sketches in the Machinima days. Colton as Chief Mastro, he was in a short that my friend Stephen Ford had made, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. It's called 2020. It's a parody of 1917, but it's a oneer. These two guys just sort of being bombarded with everything that happened in 2020. I saw him and I was like, excellent performance. And then Madeline Humphreys, who's our female lead, was recommended to me by my makeup and makeup effects artist, Kate Matlock. And Kate did all the glam makeup as well as the effects makeup for the movie. And Kate was like, I think there's an actress. She's like, she's been running around in the redwoods for like 4 days, just screaming and crying. And she's like, I think she can handle this material. And I was like, all right. And I called up Madeline, and Madeline is a Filipina actress who just moved to the States right before lockdown. So she was like, yes. She was like, I would love to do something like this. And then we did a table read. You know, we did a Zoom table read, and I redrafted the script. Then we did another table read, and we adjusted and moved things around and switched things up. So is it rehearsal while you're in it, or is it practice while you're in it? Yes. But there are so many opportunities, especially when you're working with a smaller budget, to invest your time to get those reps in. And I think people either get worried or self-defeatist, or think that like, well, I want to do it the Hollywood way. Like I should have an AD and he should be the one organizing it, or I should have a line producer and he should be the one breaking down the budget, and I should hire, and if I can't hire a storyboard artist, then I'll just do a shot sheet, or I'll just do, it's like, no, you got to do it all. You know, you got to do it all. You got to, and that is, I think that is your practice before the big game. Because when you're on set, and the way I design scenes and the style of shooting is, when you're on set, there is room for improvisation, but the plan is concrete. The foundation is there. If we want to improv within that foundation, absolutely. But if we just need to get what we need to get, there are no missing pieces. So I hope a little bit of a
hey man, that's what podcasts are for, right? So I'm really, obviously this script didn't exist 2-ish years ago because it's so pandemic based. Was it an idea that you kind of had, you interpreted it into the pandemic, or is this from being in lockdown where you had plenty of time and just felt that creative urge to kind of do something?
So I wrote a script called Not Like Us. And that was a very Carpenter-esque, The Thing. These 3 friends from Philadelphia drive up to Ithaca, New York, and get caught in a blizzard and pull over in Buffalo in a roadside kind of bar. They get snowed in and they find out there's this invasion. And so it's all these different people. I kind of wanted to hold up a mirror to Twitter. Yeah. You know, like what happens when all these big personalities are kind of forced to confront like a true foreign invader? How do they react with each other? So I built that world. I did so many revisions on that script. I actually made a radio play out of that script. You can search on any of the podcast platforms, Not Like Us, and it's a 5-part radio play that we did early pandemic. So I was kind of steeped in the mythology of that world. I'd done a Kickstarter for a different project called Christmas Eve, about an Italian-American Christmas Eve in South Philadelphia. The Kickstarter was successful. We didn't get it off the ground, but I knew that I had to make something. So I had been toying with this concept of friends meeting up in the woods, a really small picture, an homage to The Shining, Evil Dead, some Hitchcock is thrown in there, of course, Alien, of course, a lot of John Carpenter influence. And I was like, you know what? I called up Drew and I was like, if you're in, we could do this. I'm in. Called up Blake. I was like, if you're in, we could do this. I'm in. Called up Kate. If you're in, cool. My sound recorder, Zane Gwindon, sound engineer. I was like, if you're in, we're doing this. So I had the main components of the team. Everyone was in. I started writing the script and it sort of took off. I was like, I knew what the movie was going to be. I knew what the movie wasn't going to be, but I definitely wrote it to make it. Yeah. I didn't write it as like a moonshot.
Yeah, it's interesting. I figured by this time we would be like inundated with, rom-coms that happened in the pandemic, and it just doesn't seem like people really are out of it yet to that point where they want to look back at it. So I found it interesting that you
so we did
the first pandemic movie that I've heard of.
Yeah, we did this less than a year ago. So we shot for 6 days.
Yeah,
up in Big Bear, starting March 1st. So our unofficial first day was the 28th of February, where we shot a lot of scenics and B-roll and the car driving up. If you've seen it in the opening in the trailer, and then we shot throughout that week, and then we wrapped on that Friday and left. So when we were shooting it, we thought this would feel more like a time capsule and less topical. But we never mentioned COVID. We never mentioned coronavirus. And though it's an allegory for it, it is not. I would say it's not a COVID movie. It's not a pandemic movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's about people.
Yeah.
It really is about what the title says, old strangers. And I think early pandemic, we all realized we had Zoom and we could reconnect with our old friends. And we sat down and we chatted. And then that's kind of cool. And then we did it again. And we were like, okay, I'm starting to remember why we're old friends. And then after a while, it started to break down. And it's like, we're all different now. We've kind of grown apart.
Yeah.
And I love the concept because I think we've all been there. We've all had group vacations or group trips where you immediately regret it. Like the first night, why did I do this? And now I'm stuck here for 2 more days. And who got too drunk? Who's going on a tangent? Who's trying to fist fight? And I just was like, what happens when you have the best intentions and everything that can go wrong sort of goes wrong? And that was sort of the motivation for it. So
that's funny. I had that happen recently, and I can't say I regretted it, but I went up to New Hampshire with a bunch of buddies that, I hadn't seen 10, 15 years. We used to go up to New Hampshire all the time when we were in high school, and it was all the high school group, and it was really that kind of constant being this feels so familiar, and at the same time I hardly know you kind of thing.
I don't it's crazy, right? It's and I hope that I was able to I think I captured that with the movie. I think there's that sense, and one of the marching orders for the team was, we are not in a horror movie, especially with the actors. I'm like, you are not in a horror movie. Even though there are some tropey horror things that happen, at no point would you be like, oh, we're in a horror. No, you'd be like, the homie's fucking up. He's just doing stupid shit. He's going to ruin the whole weekend.
Yeah.
At no point would you be like, obviously aliens and we're all going to die. No one would say, it would take an alien standing 10 feet from you for you to be like, oh, there's actually aliens here. And that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And it's weird, but when people watch it, they'll be like, oh, you're in a horror movie, duh. And I'm like, but they're not. They're not, right. And we kind of, we play that to the bitter end. You're like, is it or isn't it? What's happening? And I wanted to play with that too. I really wanted to play with the idea of so much of genre entertainment now is so on the nose. You know, within the first 4 minutes that this is like supernatural, like spooks abound, like frights abound. Like you're not going to, like there isn't going to be any questioning of the motivation. So I really wanted to do something that felt a little bit more ambiguous. I know at times it's probably a little tropey, but I wanted it to kind of feel like, are we in this or aren't we? Like, am I going to get a curveball? What's going on here?
I really felt that way. I don't know if you've seen the new Matrix movie.
I did see the new Matrix movie.
Yeah, in the first like 20 minutes, I'm like, are they just playing off like the whole first trilogy was like a psychotic break? Like, are they really going to do that?
Are they going to do that?
It was really, and I kind of wanted them to play it like that, but you know, I really like that kind of. It gets you kind of thinking and being like, wait, so the last thing I want is to be like, here's point A, here's point B, and you know the exact path. So that kind of. You know, like a little bit of uncomfortable, like, oh shit, are they really gonna play like he's just crazy and the Matrix doesn't exist? And
yeah,
it was fantastic.
Which would have been great, honestly. And the thing is, like, even I got like, I'm not making a Matrix movie, of course, but even I got that cold feet where you're like, I can't do it. Like, it's too hard. It's so hard to do the true, like, no, it's not. He just had a psychotic break. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so hard to commit to that. Because if people don't like it, they're going to shit all over that one aspect. They're like, oh my God, like, why would you ever make a Matrix movie without the Matrix? You know what I mean? They would just go so hard. And I was concerned because I was like, I could do that. I could pull the like real reverse here. Yeah. But then are people going to just be bummed? Like, well, what the heck? Like, we were waiting for this reveal and you gave us a no prize. You know, you don't want to pull like a Last Jedi where everyone's like, like crucifying you for like your decision. You're like, oh great, should have just gave them what they wanted.
You know, it's funny. I mentioned we had an explicit label. I think we're gonna have to add a "we're shitting on Star Wars" label because I feel
that is not me. It is not me shitting on it.
Yeah,
that is me just pointing out that it got a reaction. Yeah, that is not me shitting on it.
Oh, okay. Well, there was a previous episode where someone shit all like. It was so interesting to me because it's such a. I hated the prequels, like they're god awful, and there's this weird movement now where the people who were kids when the prequels came out are shitting all over the new ones because they grew up on the prequels. I'm like, no, the prequels are stupid. The new ones are okay. You know, it's just really weird.
So it's weird. I have a love-hate relationship with the prequels. I grew up with the original trilogy, but I was like a weirdo kid that sought them out. Like I was like in 7th grade, I dressed as Luke Skywalker and everyone was like, who are you? What are you, Michael Jackson? So it like, I had one of those like rainbow colored lightsabers that you can only get at like the dollar store.
Oh yeah.
Released toy lightsabers yet since like the 70s. So I was a fan of the originals. I went to the re-releases like opening night. I was like 13. My mom dropped me off. She said, what are you doing here by yourself? I'm like, just leave me alone. Watch Star Wars. So the prequels honestly were like, they taught me to never anticipate anything. That is the lesson I learned from the prequels. Like, do not ever anticipate anything in life. I did not heed that warning. But as time has gone by, I can appreciate the prequels for what George Lucas was trying to do. And I don't think he gets enough credit in terms of technological advances, as well as just being an indie filmmaker and really putting his money where his mouth is with making the prequels. Like he paid for those.
Right.
And I don't think enough people give him credit for that. That like, yes, I think he got obsessed with the idea of the politics of the Galactic Empire or the Republic, and I think he almost to like like when you watch it now as an adult, you're like, wow, you were really obsessed with trying to tell the inner workings of the politics of the Republic, and you didn't care that much about some of the other aspects or the human aspects of this.
Yeah,
Jar Jar Binks is still the biggest misstep, but Natalie Portman is pretty terrible in those movies, and she doesn't get panned enough for that. Okay. Hayden Christensen does, but like
he gets destroyed.
Anakin is a weirdo. Like he's a weird kid that grew up on a desert planet as a slave. Like he's allowed to be kind of weird.
Yeah.
Princess Amidala should not have been that terrible of an act. There's nothing in her character that said Natalie Portman needed to play her so poorly. And she doesn't get any hate at all. Everyone's like, oh, poor Natalie Portman. She had to suffer through that. I was like, yeah, watch it now. Like, suffer through her performance. It's god awful. Like, it's one of the worst performances in that whole series. The problem with the new movies is they didn't capture any of the magic at all in any way. So much so that people are like, I love The Mandalorian.
Oh, and Mandalorian's amazing.
The Mandalorian's amazing. Like, season 2 of The Mandalorian, I loved it. But there was no moment in the new trilogy that I felt any of that.
Yeah.
Like, you could say what you want about the prequels, but you got the Darth Maul fight. That's pretty sick. Like, you got like Coruscant looks pretty cool in Attack of the Clones. And then you get a decent, I mean, it's drawn out. It's kind of crazy. It's overly CGI'd, but you get some decent Darth Vader machinations in Revenge of the Sith. In the new trilogy, you get, it's like what they did with the Matrix movie, where the cast were fans. Like, they sat down and watched the DVD of the original Star Wars, and they were like, whoa, Han Solo, do you have a Millennium Falcon? Can I get a Slurpee? Like, it was so weird. It was such a weird, I'm like, like, that would be like, I don't know, like if we met like an Iraqi war vet and we were like, hey, did you guys really like bomb Fallujah in that awesome way? Like, no, like, it was so weird for people in the world to be a fan of the source material inside the world. I feel like that's very strange.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's just my 2 cents on Star Wars real quick. I don't know how you
No, it's the best, man. Like, we're all nerds here.
Yeah, let's do it.
But yeah, like, even going more into this, the thing that I was looking forward to being disappointed by, if that's a thing, was the Book of Boba.
Yeah.
Like, I saw the trailer for that. I'm like, this looks god awful. This looks terrible. I gotta say, it's okay. It's okay. No, it's no Mandalorian, but I'm still there. I'm still watching.
So I'm sure, like me, you grew up. Boba Fett was my jam. Yeah, you know what I mean. Boba Fett was my dude. I read a lot of the comics with Boba Fett, like him after he escaped the Sarlacc pit. I miss him just being a cold-blooded bounty hunter. He's one of those characters that I applaud them for trying to give him more depth to his character.
Yeah.
But I also, in a very Western sense, love that he was just a motherfucker. Like, just didn't care. You know what I mean? Like,
it is weird that he's trying to be this crime boss, but nice.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, that doesn't. So my biggest thing, and this goes with comic books, it goes with.
Oh, we can talk comics. I'm a huge comic fan.
Oh, I used to own a comic book shop.
That's next topic.
But this goes back for like comics, movies, the Venom movie. Stop trying to make my favorite villains good guys.
After I watched Venom Let There Be Carnage, I went and read Maximum Carnage. And I was like, can Hollywood please just stop being embarrassed by the fact that they're making a comic book movie? Even to this day, when they are commonplace, they put so many justifications as to why they're like in a costume or why I'm like, stop it. Just when you read Maximum Carnage, and I had the original collection when I was like, I still have the originals. I read it after I watched that, and I was like, Cassidy's a homicidal killer. That's it. Done. Move on. That's what he is. He's a villain. Right. Venom is still a homicidal maniac that Spider-Man is forced to work with. Like, give us that story. I don't need this weird, tragic youth backstory, and now Venom's a good guy. I just give me what it is. Just try it for once. Just try to give me the thing that it was. It doesn't need to be anything else.
Right. It's like Darth Vader was redeemed in his death. He was always a bad guy, and he redeemed himself as he died. Don't make him a good guy.
No.
Yeah.
And with Boba Fett, I mean, there's like things I just think are silly. Him walking all over Mos Espa's ridiculous. It looks so stupid. I was like, could you give him like a speeder or something? Like, anything is better than him walking everywhere, because it makes it look super low budget. You know what I mean? Like, they shot a Western without horses. They're like, we couldn't afford horses, so everyone just walks in this Western town.
But then we have these metallic Vespas that everyone.
Oh my God. That was that sequence. I was like,
it was the slowest high-speed chase I've ever seen in my life.
It was slow.
Yeah, it was very slow.
But you can't give us the train sequence in the previous episode, then give us the Vespa sequence in the. I was like, you can't. You just can't. Dude, you gave us a high-speed train chase on cool speeder bikes. You can't give us like.
So just get out and run up and catch the guy.
Yeah. He's driving a speeder. They're not like a high-speed vehicle. It's like literally a Land Cruiser. That's it. You're just like.
I did roll my eyes at that quite a bit, but so what lessons have you learned from being a Star Wars fan that you brought over to Old Strangers?
What did I learn from? Well, Star Wars, the original Star Wars, I think atmosphere was so important to Star Wars, right? So like I wanted a level of Old Strangers to have like something experiential. And nature and the cosmos is a part of that. And it's definitely worked into it. And some audiences today aren't super jazzed about that. And I knew it was going to be risky. I knew some people would be like, this is boring. But if you look at the edit pace, it works and it feels good. But that original Star Wars, when you have C-3PO and R2-D2 coming across the desert in Tatooine, it's very much atmospheric and like, it paints this world, and you see that sand dragon skeleton just peeking out at points, and your imagination, like you're invested in the world. You're like, what is this? What's going on? You're asking questions, and so much of the planets and the world of Star Wars were characters unto themselves. They had their own pitfalls, and they had their own. And then I think I took a lot of that away, where it was like. So
I love that you say that, because it's like you can use that atmosphere in Star Wars as a shorthand. Like, I live in New England, and like you'll walk into somewhere and they'll be like, how is it? It's like, it's fucking Hoth outside. And people like, know exactly what you're talking about. They're like, oh, that sucks.
Yeah. And there was so much time spent, even the opening shot where you're out in the stars and the Star Destroyer comes through. It's like, these aren't rushed scenes. It's giving you, we're now in a lot of cinema, I think everything is just cut like television. It's cut basically every fifth of a second. You're getting a cut, you're moving along, you're getting other coverage. And it doesn't allow, like one of the things we wanted to do was like tuck the audience in. That's what we kept saying, like, oh, they're going to be tucked in, and really just like slide into this world, tuck yourself in to some of the class. Look at the drive up in The Shining. Like, that's a really long opening title sequence, really long, but it's setting the pace and it's taking you on a journey. And I tried to emulate that, but I don't think there's enough of that in cinema today. And I think when you go back to the original trilogy, you have a lot of that. You have a lot of atmosphere. You have a lot of like taking in the environment. And then the environment is a really big part of the storytelling.
And I love movies that can kind of give you that experience of that atmosphere. I was just thinking, you made me think of is it Dunkirk? I think it was Dunkirk.
Yeah.
Where there's just every second there's like this underlying low metallic machiney background noise. And it made me really friggin' uncomfortable to the point where like afterwards I was like jittery, like coming out of the movies. And I love when you can get that visceral experience from a movie.
And well, I'm glad you bring that up, because we did the sound. Drew and I did the sound design and mix on it. And another one of those, it's low budget, but we're going to invest. We're going to sound design every effect in this movie. And that's like a Star Wars thing. Like Star Wars was one of those first original sci-fis to have, or space operas to have like beeps and bloops and dings and dangs and lasers, and like everything gets a sound. Like the sound design in Star Wars is amazing. And it's also, you could learn like very valuable lessons that things don't need to exactly sound like what they sound like in real life. Star Wars does a great job of that. And that's, if in Old Strangers you have different, there's an effect I do when people blink, but it's like a rubber band, like plung, but it really enhances like the moment. To me, it just enhances the moment. But Star Wars kind of taught me that, there's no sound in space, but like fudge that, like that's boring.
Right.
It should sound cool. Like everything should have its own sound and vibe to it. And whether it's realistic or not, be damned. But as long as you believe it as an audience member, then I think it's successful.
Yeah. And it's so funny. It's like, you said that and it made me think of something else. But in Firefly, there's no sound in space. So they do no sound in space.
Yeah.
But they do a great job of making like the camera go like out. I mean, it's all CGI, but the camera goes out of focus and then back into focus.
Yeah.
It gives you that feeling of being there.
Yeah. And it's like, it's like when you find those creative solutions, the absence of sound or the like fully sound design, all those things, they matter in a movie.
Yeah. So coming out of Old Strangers, was there something like, what was your big, because I feel like you learned something from everything. Like, what did you learn from Old Strangers that you'll carry forward for the rest of your filmmaking career?
I think with Old Strangers, there was a few times where I'm like, I should have let the camera roll a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, it was a tough shoot. It was 15-hour days, small crew, but I wish I would have just let things play a little bit longer, just for my own sake in post, right? I had a few more options here and there. Nothing that was like detrimental to the process, but it was like, I was a little bit too like, all right, cut, we got it, moving on type of thing, where it would have been nice to just let some of the things breathe a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think I learned that because it was the best set I've ever been on, and I've been on hundreds of sets. That the crew was completely committed at every position, believed in the project and believed in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that like you need that, because again, if you don't have money to pay the best in the world to work their cushy, it's why Guillermo del Toro gets booted off of every fucking project he gets hired for. That's especially if it's like genre or if it's a licensed material, because he spends like 3 years figuring it out. And they're like, dude, we can't pay you your rate for 3 years. You can't sit around and just like draw Gollum for 3 years and be like, I don't know, I haven't had the story yet. And everyone's like, what are you doing? Like, dude, we need the shit. We're supposed to come out. Like, that kind of happened with the Hobbit trilogy. You just was like hanging with it for a year. And it's like, dude, we can't afford you. We can't just hang out. So I think like working with a really good team that had my back, that that I trusted and trusted me, and when I was like, hey guys, you want to call it a night, and they're like, no, let's keep going, or like, hey, we got to push, are you guys okay with that? And they're like, of course, man, we need this scene or we need this sequence. Like, that was really inspiring.
Yeah, I love that kind of collaboration. And we only just started doing video content, and we shot one recently, and it's to pair with one of our other podcasts. And so at the end, everyone's like, oh, what's the idea for the next one? I'm like, oh, well, it's going to come out in January, so this is kind of the idea, and I think we're going to go this way. And they all went, no. And then I'm like, oh, all right, well, what do you guys want to do? And they like came up with some ideas, and I'm like, all right, fuck it, if that's what you guys want to do, let's do it. And it's been shot, but we're still editing it, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun when it comes out. And it's just one of those, like, I don't want to be precious of my ideas, because
you can't be too precious. And it's like, my name appears on the movie a lot, but I financed the picture, and I did a lot of things on the project. So but there are so many ideas and concepts that are brought in from my team, and working so closely with them and knowing each other's shorthand. It's when to know, like, I think what would have killed this movie if I was too precious with it, that, and I think anyone that works, and you were alluding to it too, like, if you're too precious about it, who are you serving but yourself?
Right.
There's certain things you got to dig your heels in and be like, no, this is what we're doing. But for the most part, different ideas and different concepts, that's sort of the nature of bigger creative entertainment endeavors. That's what makes them great. One would argue the prequels were too much of George, and not enough people kind of challenging him.
In the way that I look at it is, this is what you guys want to do. I want to keep you guys happy, especially at this stage. I'm not paying you.
Yeah.
I want to keep you guys happy. Yeah. I want to keep you guys happy. If it doesn't go the way we hope, I can still shoot the thing that I want to shoot.
Yeah.
Next, and I'll just put that.
And you got a better footing to pitch it and be like, well, we're going to try my thing now. We did yours, but no, right. No, and like the gang I was with, like Blake and I worked really great together, and his assistant camera, James Grant, was just awesome in terms of like keeping everything cleaned up, button up, pulling focus, nailing focus. It was freezing. Cold. It was so fucking cold. I'm sure like you're used to it. You're New Hampshire. You don't care. You're like, yeah, all right, Nick, cool. But for us Californians,
Massachusetts. I'm Massachusetts. Yeah.
Oh, Massachusetts. Sorry. But for us Californians, going to Big Bear, which is like 3,500 feet above sea level on a mountain, it's pretty crisp.
Sure.
As soon as the sun goes down,
I bet
it's crisp, and it's pitch black and it's cold. And Blake and James coming up with these really cool wireless light bulb rigs that we had everywhere, and it was dope. It was stuff that like people like roll their eyes and be like, you shot in the woods. I'm like, yeah, we shot in the woods at night and there's light. Like that is something that normally you need a generator truck to do, but we used ingenuity to pull that off. Like we didn't just throw money at the problem. We found a creative solution to do it. And then I got to shout out my best boy, Jason Solomon, and my key grip, Jacover Harrell, because I worked with those guys for a long time. And like they were just out there and no one was complaining. People were like holding stands because you're in the forest. You can't just like leave a stand, it'll blow over or whatever, break. So like,
we're learning that. We're learning that.
Yeah. So it was like, everyone was just like invested and ready to go. And we were using new technology and using Steadicam rigs and using an old school Arri Alexa and shooting raw and doing all the things that like big budget productions do. But we used ingenuity and we kind of used elbow grease to make it work for our project.
Yeah. I find it just to be such an exciting time to be a creative person.
Yeah.
Because you can do everything pretty low budget now. I mean, you can get editing software for free. Our lighting rig that we first purchased was like $100 for like 4 lights and a backdrop. And, then you just kind of add on to it as you go and be like, oh, you know what? I don't really like that light, or I don't like this look, or I saw this YouTube video. And so then you just kind of keep adding to your kit and it becomes like this weird obsessive hobby.
Yeah. And like I've been on really big sets, sort of spare no expense, but catered lunches and stuff. And it's like, there's no, you still got to set up a camera and shoot something compelling. Like even with all the lighting, even with the camera moves, even with like at the end of the day, you still have to do it. You're almost having the same final product and you're competing with that. Like a movie now is competing with a TV show, is competing with a series of TikToks, is competing with an IG account, is competing with a YouTube video. And they're all made for varying budget degrees, but you're asking for an audience member's time and they're going to watch what they find compelling. It might not be your movie, or it might not be your TikTok, or it might not be your show, but like this is the first time that all media is basically created equal because of the digital distribution of it.
Have you seen, I saw it recently, this show that I watch online where they've really become successful and they've done a great job and they've kind of become like a real company now, and they just redid their set. Their set's gorgeous and high tech, and there's a pushback of like, oh, you're not the homegrown thing anymore. Do you think, like, do you ever consider that? Is that something that you see a lot of? Or
so that was when I came to Machinima, I came in because of my production experience.
Mm-hmm.
And Machinima was mostly doing talking heads, like Canon 5D talking heads. And that's how their audience liked it. And I came in and I was like, jibs and lights and cameras and dolly moves, and our sketches are high production value. And people were like, fuck it. Like it just doesn't fit because that's not what they're there for. And it took me a long time to realize that, like, you got to know your audience. And that increase in production value for the creator is like, wow, I've achieved another level, but for their
Right.
audience, they're like, oh, I'm sorry, like what, like everything that I love, like what, it's not good enough anymore. Like you had to change it, you had to upgrade it. Like, so I it's tough. It's especially if you come from, I think you have a better chance of coming from like YouTube or content creation as a hobbyist than you do from like a film background and trying to match that style. Because I think the beauty of like a YouTube, the beauty of a TikTok is homespun, regular people. And it's also the sharing of either a fandom or sharing of, there's a commonality about it. It isn't like watch my thing because it's a narrative piece. It's a lot more like we all enjoy this narrative piece. Let's have a discussion. So I think like I had a comic book channel that was like an in-between before we launched DC Daily, but it was called Action Figure Comics. And we did a ton of stuff. I did like a weekly roundup, you know, did like a stack attack, which was like weekly poll list. Then we would do this thing called Nitpicker, which is basically like shitting on all bad 90s comics. And then there would just be, you know, kind of breakdowns of like Tom King's Batman run or just going to like toy unboxings, things like that. And it was really hard to get the audience to look past the production value.
Yeah. It's just so funny because you want to put out like the absolute best thing you can.
Yeah.
But there's almost like this line where you're like, don't cross it. Don't be too good.
Yeah. And I mean, I wasn't the right look for a lot of the YouTube stuff. I think a lot of people are like, who's a smug asshole? And I'm like, oh, come on, man. I was like, it's like I was a nerd my whole life.
Yeah.
Kicking into high gear in adulthood, and everyone's like, fuck the smug asshole. I'm like, come on. Look at this. Look at this. You know what I'm saying? Like,
goes to the shell shirt. I noticed that as soon as you got on.
Yeah. Between this, my Kira shirt, and then I have a Starcourt Mall shirt that I was going to rock from Stranger Things season 3.
Nice.
I want to talk about comics though, because comics is my first love.
Okay. What do you want to talk about? I grew up 2 blocks from a comic book shop. I became obsessed. Even through, like knowing the comic industry, they're like, oh, everyone drops off around 12 when they find girls, and then they come back about like 18. Not me. I was there the whole time.
I'm with you, player.
But so I opened the comic book shop, and then I ended up getting divorced, and that kind of spelled the end of the comic book shop. Yeah, it is what it is. But like my best friend, my producer, my editor, I met because he was one of my customers. Like it's still, and I love the movies. I can't seem to find the time to read anymore. So it becomes why am I buying these if I never, you know, the pile, my read pile just keeps growing.
Yeah. So I converted to digital probably over 10 years ago, digital, because for that reason. Like I would move around and long boxes or just stacks would just be everywhere and bagged and boarded up, just sliding all over the place, trades strewn about. And I was like, I can't keep doing this. I was like, I love the stories. I love, you know, as much as I love the collecting, I do love the art and words. Like reading was tough for me when I was younger. So comics were the kind of what I need to get into reading.
I agree. That's exactly what happened to me. I'm
a visual learner.
I'm very visual and audio, but it also, so for a long time, my friends make fun of my spelling all the time. And I'm like, oh, I think I might be dyslexic. And that was kind of my like passing off. And then I dated this girl who's a teacher, and she spoke to one of her friends and was like, oh, what do they do for like dyslexic people to help them? And she's like, oh, they give them word searches. The word searches really help. And she tells me this, and I'm like, they used to take me out of class to do word searches with my spelling words. And I'm like, holy shit, I am dyslexic. No one ever told me. And so, you know, the comic books have kind of that right amount of reading where I can read through it at a reasonable amount of time. I don't feel like I'm, you know, my nightmare in school was when they're like, oh, you know, there's one page that the two of you have to read. And, you know, when you're done, flip the page. And, you know, because I would take way too long to read. Yeah.
I mean, I eventually became a good reader, but initially I was like, I loved comics. I was a visual learner. Like I loved the art. I loved the framing. I loved everything about comic books. Working for DC was kind of a dream come true. Like I used to go to the DC offices once a week and have meetings, and
that's awesome.
You know, like my friends that work there, they would hook me up. I get to go into like the vault, and there's just all the trades that they've ever made. and I just pick some trades up and stuff. All prestige format books, and it was great. It was really awesome. But what starts to happen is when comics become your job, it sucks. When you have to read a comic, it gets really tough.
Yeah,
it's really tough. But I did, now that like I have some space from it, I've gotten back into it. I'm reading a lot of manga. I do like Dragon Ball. I like Berserk. So
the last thing I was reading was Go Hedora, I think is what it was called.
Was that worth checking out?
I learned that I have a cultural detachment from manga, where I'm like, there's parts of it that I really like, but I feel like every 8 pages they stop to eat.
Certain manga does that,
and
Berserk,
I'm like,
Berserk does it. I don't know if you read Berserk, but Berserk is like fucking bonkers. That's like really violent, gory, dope. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
No, but a lot of the modern mangas, there's a lot of I mean, Goku always be slamming food.
Yeah, and then there's like it's all about like wizards and zombies and we're gonna have a baseball game. And you're like,
I don't really going on? I don't mess with that too much. I'm more like, I love like the Guyver. You got to know the Guyver.
Yeah, for sure.
I went to Blockbuster Video as a kid, and I would just rent those. My cousins were like, "Dude, what are you watching?" I'm like, "I don't know. This is amazing."
I always liked watching Vampire Hunter D.
Ninja Scroll, Ghost in the Shell, Akira. Of course, I saw Akira probably 10 times before I understood it. And I was like, I know this is cool. It looks really cool. I have no clue what's going on, though.
It's bizarre.
Yeah. I'm like 7 years old. Like, what? I don't know what this is. 8 years old, Saturday anime, trying to figure out what the heck's going on. But I wanted to ask you, like, what do you think of the current state of comics? But you're not really that.
No. And it's interesting because I still have friends in the industry, and like it's every industry has like that old school versus new school, and the old school's like, no, they don't know what they're missing. It's, there's a tangible collectability, and like, but they just want the story. Let them just have the story. They don't want to get something graded and put it away and never touch it. It's, I being as old as I am now and getting older and talking to people in comics and music, and the one thing that I think makes the most sense that I've heard from a few people is do what you like.
Yeah.
Like if you like that, hunt it down and get it great. Cool, man. But don't enforce that on someone else.
I agree. I think also gatekeeping was such a big part of fandom. This gets controversial now, which I don't understand why, but people that read comics or like Star Wars they were nerds, and like not nerds in like the hung with girls sense, or like also
I used to do comic book shows when if you saw a girl like girl, it
was usually a vendor's wife who was helping him unload the car, right, like that. Exactly. And she was like 49 years old, like, you know what I mean? But like it was not a space. It was very much a nerdy guy space, and all the trappings of nerdy guys being like, well, actually, you don't know. Well, in this issue, it was all that all day long. Like you go in a comic shop basically to feel bad about yourself, but then to come back and oh, I read this, I bet you didn't, type of shit. I find it interesting when people are like, oh my God.
Actually, so Wolverine's first appearance was in Hulk 180, not 181.
Yes, just like that.
Yeah.
But I remember I went to like one of the Marvel. It was back when Marvel was cool, and they would do stuff like Joe Quesada was actually a cool dude, and was a comic book guy. And you're like, whoa, Joe Quesada's cool. His art was awesome. They would do like Stump the Marv or whatever. Like this dude, I can't remember. Maybe that wasn't it, but I stumped him in Marvel What If Daredevil was an agent of Shield who brought Marvel into Shield. Or who brought Daredevil into Shield, and I stumped him with that, and I got like an issue of a comic, and the answer's like Tony Stark, because it's a what if, and he was like, all right, no more what ifs, and he got all, but like that was the stock and trade of the comic book world, nerd fandom, all that. Like the guys who knew the most names of the characters in the Cantina scene, you know what I mean? Like that was some serious escrow. So when like people are like, oh man, it's so so gatekeepy. I'm like, yeah, that's because that's what it was. That's what it is. It wasn't pop culture. It wasn't like, hey, walk up and, you know, put a coin in the jukebox and like buy a comic or like
it's kind of, you know, even, you know, typically nerds weren't athletic, and athletes were all about who could be the most athletic, and nerds were like, well, I can't be athletic, but I can know more than you.
I can know more than you.
So it is kind of that same alpha male, but just in a different.
Exactly. Yeah, you know, it's the same deal. Yeah. Like dudes are gonna dude. They're gonna do that. They're gonna find a way. They're gonna find a way to like have a pecking order.
Yeah.
You know, there's gonna be the dark horse. There's gonna be the like lemmings. There's gonna be the best friend, like the right hand man. Like that's what it is. It just that was with fandom for the longest time.
And I think it just comes with age, because you know, like I'm. You know, I just had another birthday and I'm getting up there in years, and now I'm just like, I don't care, man. Like, leave that poor girl alone. Stop asking her to name Wasp band songs because she's wearing a Wasp shirt. Just let her wear the shirt she likes, you know? Like,
I think you're only allowed to do that if someone's wearing a Led Zeppelin shirt, because I'm like, there's no way you listen to Led Zeppelin. And that is the easiest. That's the lowest.
Really? You don't think people listen to Led Zeppelin?
No, like young kids. When I see like young,
see, I would disagree, man. Like my kids are turning 18 and 20 this year.
They're rocking Led Zeppelin,
and I'm pretty sure they've rocked Led Zeppelin shirts. Like my son Liam's like, I'm really getting into the Beatles, and my daughter's like, I love Nirvana, and I'm like, so weird. It's just
all right. Yeah. Maybe I see. I'm getting old. I just feel like anytime I'm in California and I see someone at like the Americana and they have a Led Zeppelin shirt on, I'm like, Led Zeppelin is the lowest hanging fruit to listen to, and I don't even think you've done that.
But I mean, it's also like, I'm terrible at song names. Like, you could ask me my favorite band and be like, name a song, and I'd be like, yeah, I don't know. I know ones I like, and I might be able to pull one or two. But even like, it's also one of those, it becomes that moving the goalpost. It'd be like, well, name a song. You name a song. Like, well, everyone knows that song.
Everyone knows that song.
Like, you just ask them to name a song, you know?
There was a time where before they asked me as my job to talk about comics, there was a time where I was like, I can't do this anymore because comicdom is too toxic. And it's just like, you know, and I don't think people realize how bad it was. Like they think it's bad now with like message boards, but I was like, you basically gave everyone a bullhorn. People are going to talk shit, but it was like, it just was. I remember I would walk in a comic shop, and you know, it's customer service, retail service, and you would be like, hey, you got anything to recommend? And it's like, roll their eyes. You'd be like, nah, man, like just look around. And you'd be like, okay, like I remember it was such a general like. And that was part of the like je ne sais quoi of a comic shop, but then it also was like, no, man, I come here every week. I would like you to at least be polite to me when I come in your store, dropping like $50 in floppies, and you're over there like eating your lunch, not even acknowledging me, and I'm just wandering around for an hour and a half, and I'm like, man, this is my. And
it's a little bit in how you do it, because a comic shop is one of those places where you can bust balls and get away with it, and you know, it's from having the shop, people come in and be like, oh, what should I be reading? And it's Wednesday. And you're like, oh, you should, like at the time Walking Dead was on, I'm like, you should be reading Walking Dead. I got so far behind Walking Dead because that was my go-to recommendation and everyone bought it. And then I'm like constantly trying to adjust my orders. And I'm like, I can never get to read this stupid thing. But in shitting on someone's options. So this guy comes in one day. I can't remember what he was buying. I want to say maybe it was All-Star Superman. So this goes way back. And I hate Superman.
Oh, you're a Superman hater.
I don't ever feel like he's in peril, so I don't care. Okay. And so this guy comes up and he's buying All-Star Superman, and I shit all over Superman, and he's now my best friend, editor, producer of the show. Like, so it's even.
You don't even like All-Star Superman? That's like the best Superman story.
I honestly never read it, but I just shit on it because of Superman. But it's like there's a way you can kind of do it and not be. If you're gonna shit on someone, you have to allow them to shit on you.
I enjoy ball breaking. I'm from South Philadelphia. That's all we do is break balls.
Right.
No, I just mean like the general, like it doesn't have the time and don't even care. It doesn't even care that you're in the shop. Like I get more. And I'm just like, what the? This is awful. Like this is. I'm like, this is the dream, man. You work in the comic shop. Like, this is what it is. Everyone here is part of the club. Anyone that walks in the store isn't like, oh, a comic shop. Let me try that out. Like, I've done everything else. I'm going to read comics now. Like, no, like this is the initiated, dyed-in-the-wool fan of comics are in the shop.
It was an amazing experience. Obviously, you know, my best friend I met there. You know, I was invited to weddings for customers. Like, they're like, I'm getting married. And, you know, when I ended up closing up shop, like one of my customers like broke down in tears. It was dude, and it was just like, it becomes such like a clubhouse where like everyone is friends and everyone's kind of that, you know, everyone is kind of vying to be biggest nerd, but everyone's still friends. And so those were great times. They were really great times.
What was the name of your shop?
Barron's Collectibles.
Okay, dope. I like that.
And it was from like a weird mistaken, like this was how friggin' long ago it was. It came from like a chat room where, you know, I was just like Andy D, and then someone came in and started yelling at me. And I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, aren't you Andy from Ohio, whatever? I'm like, no, man. So then I'm like, okay, so screen name. I learned what a screen name was. And I was huge into Baron Munchausen.
Oh, okay.
So it was Baron M, and then that just kind of like became my eBay name, which then just, you know, kind of strung into everything else.
Oh, yeah, I'm big. Collectibles, comics, all that. I would be, if I was in the Mass area, I would be in Barron's Collectibles back in the day.
Well, yeah, so super, and we're totally off track now, but that's fine. I got to know a local band, the Quins, great band, and their lead singer Quincy came in to do a podcast interview, and my producer's like, hey, he's from East Bridgewater too. And I'm like, what? And he's like, oh yeah, you know, he's from East Bridgewater. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm like, oh, do you know this person? We started talking. I'm like, oh yeah, he used to work for me. And he's like, oh, where? I'm like, oh, my comic book shop. He goes, I used to shop in your store.
Oh, dude.
So it's just such a cool, you know, it's just a great community. Even now, like he had fond memories of it. So that's, you know, it's awesome. So, but
too much of the flash dash.
Let's get back on the rails a little bit. Where can people see Old Strangers?
So Old Strangers is available right now to purchase or rent on all video on demand platforms: iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, Vudu. It's coming to Vimeo as well, and international. There's an international Vimeo link because it's only being distributed currently in North America. You could also rent it on Comcast On Demand or Verizon Fios On Demand. I will say my other movies came out on like Netflix and Hulu years ago, but the iTunes layout is really nice. If you are integrated into the Apple iTunes ecosystem, I think now is a great time if you're an indie filmmaker, because your movie is presented like it's Infinity War. Like in my movie collection, I have it right next to Infinity War, and all the branding's there. Like when it goes full screen, there's like still photography, the trailer starts playing. So it really gives you an elevated experience, more so than it was a few years ago. And then hopefully we end up on some streamers, but I would greatly appreciate any support for the picture. Rent it. It's like $3.99. Give it a fair star rating. It's like perfect score, but like just give it something that's not a 2 or a 1, please.
Yeah. And where can people go to find you on social?
So I myself, I'm not on social media. That was the decision I made, but you can check out Old Strangers at Old Strangers Movie on Facebook and Instagram, and at Old Strangers Movie on YouTube.
Nice.
I'm actually going to cut. I think I'm going to cut a little Grindhouse trailer.
Oh, cool.
Cinema. Yeah. I just for fun, just to see, maybe get some extra eyeballs. And we have a cabin giveaway coming out. So we're giving away, if you buy the movie or rent the movie and leave a review, we're giving away a 2-night stay at the cabin we shot at. So.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Scare the shit out of people. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I've always said that my favorite episodes of the podcast are where a stranger comes in and a friend leaves, and I feel like today is one of those episodes.
Oh, that's cool.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Anytime you're in the Boston area, you let me know. We'll go comic book shopping.
You got it, man. Thank you so much for having me. This is great. This is a great conversation. This was a pleasant surprise. I was having not a great day, and being able to chop it up with you and talk.
Oh, good, man. I'm glad.
Movies, comics, nerd culture, Star Wars, RIP. No, it's back.
There's still good stuff. There's still good stuff out there. So thanks again for spending the time with us, and thanks to our listeners. We'll see you guys again next week. And thanks for checking out the show today, listeners. If you enjoyed the content today, you can go over to patreon.com/Inebri-art to support the show. You can join over there for just a few dollars a month and help us provide this fun content that you just checked out. You can also email us at Inebri-art.com with your questions, complaints, and concerns, or you can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art or at Inebri-art6 on Instagram. And also don't forget to check out our other shows, Bar Talk Podcast, Old Colony Cast, Inebri-art, and all the other shows on the Inebri-art Network, which you can find at Inebri-art.com. Thanks again for listening.